Well, I think the ultimate reason to build a better business is because eventually you're going to sell it.
Mm.
And if you have a better business before you sell it, then you can enjoy it while you own it.
You're listening to the Marketing for Accounting Firms podcast. Each episode, we have conversations with firm owners and marketing experts about how to attract your ideal clients, foster trust, and build a marketing engine that works for an accounting firm. I'm your host, Matt Banker. I'm the founder of Benchmark Growth Marketing. You can find more episodes and subscribe to our newsletter at marketingforaccountingfirms.com. Now, here's the show. All right, I've got Brannon Poe with me today. He works with a lot of firms in the process of buying and selling, but also on the training and getting your practice, running a better practice. Brannon, tell us, this is the Marketing for Accounting Firms podcast. Why are you on the show here today? What's your background and expertise? Why should any of our listeners be listening to you when it comes to marketing and thinking about how to run their firm?
Well, I think the ultimate reason to build a better business is because eventually you're going to sell it.
Mm.
And if you have a better business before you sell it, then you can enjoy it while you own it. And so, it's kind of like fixing up a house. Do you want to fix up the house 10 years and then enjoy it? Or do you want to just do it all right before you sell? So I'm very interested in practice management topics. And I feel like a sale is a very interesting event in that it's so finite and so clear. It's like, okay, your practice was worth this, it sold for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we've got a lot of history. We've been selling firms for 20 years, over 20 years. And so we know what buyers want. We know what the market wants. And if you can build a practice that the market wants, you're probably going to like it better too.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're not here talking about how to market your practice for sale exactly. We're talking about how to build a practice that is worth selling, and marketing is going to be a part of that. Maybe first question here, just overarching, how early in the life of your practice or in your career should you be starting to think about what it looks like to sell your practice?
I believe it's helpful as you're planning to build your practice, or as you're, I think thinking about selling is valuable no matter where you are in the process, because it gives you the end in mind, begin with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if you factor in sort of what's marketable, it's not that you should totally be a slave to that. You should just only have strategy towards an exit, but I feel like it can inform your strategy in a very powerful way if you're thinking about the marketability of the firm.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my assumption is one of the biggest factors is you as the firm owner and your relationship to the firm. And so if you're building a firm that you intend to sell someday, you're going to build something that relies less on you as an individual, and you're thinking about it more as a business or a brand.
Correct. I think it gives you a higher level perspective to think that way. And you're exactly right. We find that the most valuable firms are not overly owner-centric, and they're also profitable. So that's what buyers want. They want cash flow and they want time. So, which totally makes sense, right? That's what people want.
Well, let's talk just a little bit about the actual brand and the business. So I'll define brand a little bit for our listeners. When I think of like the business, it's all encompassing the operations, the structure, the pricing model, all of that. When I think about the brand, I'm mostly thinking about perception. Like how do people from the outside, that can be your clients, but also prospects and partners and things, how do they think about your firm? And as I've been thinking about this conversation, I have all kinds of questions, because the acquisition selling space is something that I don't know a lot about, but I compare it, and tell me if this is fair. I think about it like selling a house, right? And when I think about brand, I'm thinking about potential buyers who are walking through the house with their realtor, and they're looking at the kitchen, and the biggest question that comes to my mind is, Are buyers looking for, like, does this thing have good bones and I see a lot of potential here? Or do buyers want to see something that is like up to date, like a modern firm? Because I could see it going both ways. As a marketer, I might say, hey, there's a great team, a great business model here, but their website is terrible and they don't do any marketing. And so I could come in here and I could turn it, or I could do some marketing and really get a lot more value out of it, versus, coming in and being impressed with how well run or how well built the kitchen is, modern appliances and all that. The marketing and the website are up to par. How important is it to have a strong brand and website and all those things when you're thinking about buying or selling? How does that impact perception and the idea of a sale?
I think a lot of CPA firms are not very well branded. I think a lot of those brands are not terribly transferable. If your business name is, Russell Crowe CPA and Company, it's going to be hard to transfer that. And most state boards won't let you transfer that name. So, if you're picking a name, a more generic brand is probably more transferable. So if you think about transferability, which is ironic that Poe Group Advisors is my last name, and I've named it that. But so at any rate, I think transferability of the brand, we find that most often in these transitions, the name does not usually gets changed. The name usually gets changed. So in that regard, I think the value of the brand is not as highly valued because of that. That being said, I think your website is a key component of how your firm functions. And it impacts the things that buyers do care about. So if you have a good website, what's likely to happen is perhaps your client quality is going to be higher. Perhaps your ability to attract talent is going to be better. So you're going to have better talent. You're going to have better clients. Those are the things that buyers look at and really care about because they're tangible, right? When you're looking at a sale. I think there's a lot of intangible things with a website too, just an impression that you're making on the buyer, right? The quality of that website says a lot about the firm. It's one of those features that I think might kind of go subconsciously into the buyer's perception, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the curb appeal, right?
It's the curb appeal. It's exactly right. So, but I think the curb appeal is important because it often does drive the fundamentals of the business.
Yeah, when we think about perception, for example, if your website looks like it's 12 years old, it's going to be hard to convince prospective clients that you're cutting edge in terms of the technology that you're using to serve them or the processes that you have. It might be true. You might actually have really great up-to-date processes and you never updated your website because you have plenty of clients or for whatever reason, but still, the perception of your firm is that you might be outdated if your website is outdated.
It might be, yes. And I think that could be the perception. And, what I find is like a website is really going to influence the kind of referrals you get. So if you've got some great clients and you're giving them great service and they want to tell people about you and they do,
right?
What's the first thing those people do? They go and they look at the website. So I think it can influence the quality of the clients in a pretty profound way. I don't have to sell you on the benefits of a good website. But
sell on my behalf. This is great.
Yeah, but I just think it drives the fundamentals of the business.
This week's episode is sponsored by Benchmark Growth Marketing, helping your accounting firm expand your niche with branding, positioning, websites, SEO, and marketing strategy. If you're an accounting firm looking to fix your marketing, Benchmark is your go-to solution. Learn more at marketingforaccountingfirms.com. Now back to the program.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something that I think is underrated is a lot of people think, well, I get most of my business from word of mouth, from referrals, so I don't really need a good website. The truth is, like you said, anyone who gets a referral from a current client or a friend or whoever, the first thing they're going to do is check out your website. So a good website can really impact who eventually does make the call. If I mention the name of my accounting firm to a friend, they go to the website and they're unimpressed. They might trust me, but that might not be enough to get them to actually book the call. Like they may like look elsewhere or see if there's other referrals that they feel a little bit more comfortable about. When you're thinking about, we'll stick on the website thing. When people are considering selling their firm, do you advise them to do a website, or is that something that you would generally advise, like, hey, let that be, the buyer's problem once they take over?
Well, it depends on the timing of when they're coming to me. We have people that come to us really early in the planning stages. They're 5, 10 years out sometimes, which is great. I think it's smart to plan way ahead. If you've got that kind of time, then there's a lot you can do to change the practice, and a website modernization might be part of that strategy. Where, it's different strategies for different people, but if somebody's coming to me like they're wanting to sell next year, then it's not really something that we would suggest doing, especially if the brand is not going to be transferable and it's not going to have enough time to affect the fundamentals of the business. But I think embarking on a marketing strategy that involves, a rebrand or a website refresh can be a very powerful strategic event that can impact the value of the practice.
Obviously, if I'm considering buying a practice, I'm going to think about who the current clients are, like who that client mixture is, if it's a good fit for the type of work that my firm is really great at, if there's a personality fit, business it has enough similarities. But I also might be thinking, is this a firm that can effectively bring in new clients and has a good reputation and all that? Where, as a buyer, how much should I be thinking about the effectiveness of the sales and marketing as a department or as a program? Is that something that is transferable in any real way, or is that something that the new buyer has to kind of build from scratch in most cases?
Well, buyers definitely look at the growth trajectory of the firm. So most firms, I would say, are modestly growing. Some firms, especially some of the new virtual and cloud firms, are scaling very rapidly. So when we're selling a cloud firm and it's scaling extremely rapidly, yes, they're going to be very interested in the sales and marketing pipeline and processes. We got a firm that just went under contract recently that's almost 100% of their revenue is non-recurring. So they have built quite the engine for, they're doing research and development credits, and they were doing the ERC credit, which is now gone. But they had all these non-recurring sources, and they just got a machine. And so in that regard, that was really a primary aspect of that marketability of that firm.
That's an indicator that they're doing well with the sales and marketing, because if it's project based, it means they're constantly bringing in new business. Something's working to bring in new business, whereas it could be it's a solid firm with recurring revenue, but it doesn't necessarily tell you if they're good at bringing in new business or not.
Right. Unless it's scaling like extremely quickly, which a lot of the virtual firms are able to do. And a lot of buyers, I think, if you look at the highest demand of the firms that we sell, it's rapidly growing virtual firms.
So growth, if you're growing a lot, I assume it allows you to, get a higher, I don't know what a higher valuation on your firm. But what you're saying is, in most cases, they want to see proven success, not opportunity, right? So I'm not looking for a value firm where I can turn it around and pay a cheap price and then turn it around. I'm looking for something that has a proven track record.
Yes, I think the proven track record is going to have a higher valuation than the fixer upper.
And is that your
All
recommendation to buyers too? They should be looking for that track record?
I think it just depends on the buyer. You know, if a buyer is highly skilled at practice management and they've done a little bit of a turnaround in the past, then a diamond a fixer upper can be a really good buy for them because they know they have the ability to do that.
Right.
Private equity is a great example. Private equity sees a tremendous opportunity in the accounting industry, and that's why they're getting involved. And they know how to manage things by the numbers, and they know how to do turnarounds. And so I think there are a lot of fixer-uppers in the accounting industry. So
yeah, they exist. Now, I think that probably your recommendation is if you're looking to sell, you don't want to be seen as a fixer-upper, though.
You don't. I think what you want is to have something really powerful that a lot of people are going to want.
Well, just in a general sense, when people are looking for this, maybe even goes beyond a little bit of the marketing discussion, but when people are looking at a firm, what are some of the criteria that they're looking for? How would that makes them both attractive as a firm that someone would want to buy, but also that would help increase the valuation, the value of the firm that you're planning on selling? What are the main factors in that?
Well, there are several. I mean, location is one factor that you can't really do a whole lot about unless you become a virtual firm, if you're in an undesirable location. But buyers look at the two metrics I think are probably, I would say, the most important, and that's just cash flow to owner. You know, how much cash can the owner pull out every year? And that impacts debt service. So if you don't have very good owner cash flow, sometimes no one can buy it and service the debt. So it has to be fixed up. The other thing they look at is, which we touched on already, is how owner-centric is the practice. How many hours is the firm owner working in the practice? And they also look at quality of fees, quality of clients. And I would say those are the big things. There are certain things that will impact the number of buyers. So when we look at valuation, when we think about valuation, we always kind of think about how many people in the market are going to want this firm. If it's 200 people that are going to want it, it's going to sell for a higher multiple, probably stronger terms for the seller. If there are only 3 people that want this firm in the whole world, it's going to be really hard to negotiate a good deal for the seller. Not impossible, but it's much more complicated and difficult. So we think about this maximum number of potential buyers concept. And there are certain types of work that are not very marketable. Like for a smaller firm, audit work is becoming less and less desirable. So, if you've got a $2 million firm and you've got $300,000 worth of audit work, well, you've just probably eliminated a certain percentage of that total buyer pool just because you have audit work.
Is that because they don't want to take that work on at all, or because they have to have special staffing in order to do that?
All of the above. A lot of people just, and in my opinion, if you're only dabbling in something, you're probably not really even making money on it. It's hard to maintain margins when you're only dabbling. You need to be focused. Focused firms tend to have higher margins.
Unpack that for me a little bit. What are some examples of, because there in the marketing world, we talk a lot about, are you a generalist firm or are you a niche firm? Because that really impacts how you do your marketing and some of the available tactics to you. But I've also met generalist firms who are very focused in what they do. But when you think about like what a focused firm looks like, describe that. What are some examples?
Of different ways you can think about this. You could have a firm that's highly focused just on tax. Like they're very good at tax, and they might have a lot of different industries that they serve, but they're very good at tax. Or you can have firms that are quite good at light advisory. And so you could kind of get these segments of your business highly focused. You can have team members that are highly focused. And as a firm gets larger, you can have a more general firm because you've got specialists within the firm.
Mm-hmm.
And then also you can focus on a niche. You can go after, and we're seeing this a lot with virtual firms. I have a client that just does veterinarian practices. He focuses on veterinarians all over Canada. And, the thing about any of that is the more you do of something, the better you get at it. I mean, you're an example of that, and so am I. Like, you're focused on marketing for accountants. I'm focused on, brokerage for accountants. And you just become more knowledgeable. You become the expert. And so your quality is going to improve. And if your quality is high, then your margins are higher.
I think one of the things that a lot of people don't, when they think about focus or having a niche, I think the common definition is usually like a niche and a market as the same thing. And what I think, and this is sort of what you're saying, is that when you become a specialist within a specific market, it's not just that you like to work with veterinarians, it's that you've learned what veterinarians need and you're able to provide a service, a different approach than anyone else. Because anyone else could come in and say, oh, I also really just like to work with vets and I'm cheaper, right? Well, if the only differentiation you have is that you're giving attention to one particular market, you don't really have a defensible position. But if you've developed that expertise through working with the same type of client, you have a unique approach, or you have specialization in the types of software that they use within that industry, or the specific tax needs for these types of clients. Now you've really developed something that is focused and has sort of that defensibility. And like you said, that's going to lead you to higher quality clients at the end of the day, which is going to be higher fees and all of that. And just bringing that all the way back to the marketing discussion is that I'm a big believer that marketing isn't just about bringing in a lot of leads, but it also helps you justify, and justify is not the right word, but like your higher fees match. If your website and your messaging is really on point, that's going to help show that those higher fees are worth it. The value of the services, it helps you protect the quality of what you're doing as well. Not just bringing in new leads, it helps you with the current clients and the current fee structure, business model that you want to actually run.
Yes, I totally agree. I think firm owners should constantly be churning a little bit of their client base. You should have a nice funnel that brings in new higher quality leads. And you should be probably filtering out some clients every year that don't fit the firm anymore. So you can't eliminate clients that you don't like, and you can't get rid of the people that are not a good fit if you don't have confidence that you can pretty easily replace that work and with better work. And it's I have clients come to me and they say, well, I don't really need any new clients. And well, that might be true, but if a perfect ideal client came your way, would you find time to work with them? And most people would.
Yeah. There's another piece of, and I don't know how this impacts or affects the buying and selling of a firm, but these days with most accounting firms, marketing is maybe in many cases it's 50% bringing in new clients, but it's also 50% getting attracting and retaining talent and finding people for your firm. Do you see any correlation between the strength of a brand and the staffing and the people that they're able to attract?
I do. I think the culture is often sort of captured on the website. A well-done website will sort of capture the essence of that firm's culture, which helps attract talent. And buyers are definitely focusing on the talent that's coming with the purchase. That's becoming more and more of a focus from the buyer's perspective. So anything you can do to create a good team and improve your firm culture is probably a very worthy effort.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I'm as a marketer, sometimes I'm in competition with the acquisition space. A lot of firms that I've worked with, they've grown through acquisition rather than through marketing. And so they're looking to purchase a firm, to add monthly revenue or annual revenue, whatever that is. But I know that in a lot of cases, buying a firm for the talent is one of the most attractive reasons to go out and acquire and grow through that model. I want to shift the conversation just a little bit and talk about, you've got your accounting practice academy workshop that you run through Poe Advisors, and you have a marketing module as part of that, but it happens a little bit later in the process. Can you tell me just a little bit about what is that workshop and how does that lead to this discussion about marketing for a practice?
Right. So the workshop is an 8-week virtual workshop, and there is a community component in it. So each week you meet with a group of other owners. We usually group them in 6 to 8 people. So it's kind of a small virtual group. And I would say the typical firm owner that comes into Academy is very, very busy. And sometimes the pain point is they're burned out, or they don't have time, or they're trying to get their practice ready for a sale. And then occasionally we get some really younger people in there that just want to start with a really good knowledge base to get going. So I definitely wasn't marketing focused. Like, the first part of the workshop is all about creating capacity to free up the owner, and because most of them they don't have time to breathe, and that creates other problems. You start putting too much pressure on your team, and then they're going to start leaving. Your employee turnover can actually go in the direction you don't want it to go into. So the first part of the workshop is really about some of those focusing out items, like, are there some things in your business that you just need to eliminate altogether? So we really get into capacity creation. And then module 7, so week 7 of 8, is just marketing focused. And a surprising thing happened when we were building the workshop. I realized, like, all the concepts in week 1 through 6, like, the marketing actually made everything, tied everything together that we had already put in the workshop. And so the reason is because at that point, they knew what they wanted to be, right? Or they were getting a really good idea of what kind of firm they wanted to be, who they wanted to serve, what clients they needed to get rid of. And so we put in that the marketing was to increase the referrals. So that was one of the major benefits of coming up with a new marketing strategy. But the act of going through that process of creating a marketing strategy really requires you to be super clear about who you serve and who you want as a client. And I just found that to be incredibly clarifying for everything else that had been learned prior to that.
I think that's such good advice. Marketing obviously is important. I think it's powerful. I think, you mentioned earlier, even if you don't need a lot of new clients, you can always use better clients, but it's downstream from this other work that you have to do. It's very difficult for me as a marketer. I always kind of dread those calls when someone just calls me up and says, "Hey, I need more leads." And I'm like, "Great. Well, what kind of leads do you need?" It's like, "I'll take anyone." Okay, well, what services do you do? And they say, well, we do all these, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, services. And I think, it's like trying to salt the ocean, right? You're just adding, you're sending all this marketing messaging out there, and it's just getting lost because you're trying to get everything and everyone all at once. And the reality is that the firms, I think, that are really effective in their marketing do understand who they are, who their ideal customer is. They really understand their service offering. They're priced at a premium because they have specialty expertise. And so even in my business, we found it just benefits our clients so much more when we take a step back and say, all right, we're not going to start by running Google ads. We're going to start by talking about your positioning.
Right.
Who are you in the market? Who do you compete with? Why should they choose you? And if you don't do that work first, it's usually a waste of money. I think that's the
I agree.
reality.
So I'll give you a perfect example about this. So we have one of our firms that went through Academy have on their website now a filter. So if you're a new client and you request a new client consult, it takes you through a type form filter. And one of the first things it says, our minimum fee is $2,000 regardless of the complexity of the return. Mm-hmm. If this is not within your price range, or is this within your price range, yes or no? If it's yes, you continue on the form. If it's no, then you're filtered out. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, you have to know what your minimum fees are before you can set that filter up on your website, right?
Yep.
So it's little things like that really inform the whole site, and they can really impact the flow of leads. Like that firm is not going to get any small inquiries. They're not going to spend time. They're not even going to be on the phone with those people.
Right.
So,
which is a benefit because, at the end of the day, you mentioned time. Most of the firms come to you because the firm owner is so busy. And one of the things I like to tell my clients and prospects is marketing is expensive, but you can spend time or money. And most people are going to spend whatever one they value less. Right. So if you don't value your time, you're going to be cheap. You're going to spend time to do the marketing yourself. But if you do value your time, it's going to be worth it to hire a professional to do it for you. But the reality is, at the end of the day, you're going to spend one or the other if you're going to do it at all.
Yeah. And the professional will do a way better job than you will.
Yeah. Well, and I would hope so, being a professional. Yeah. But I think we all know there are also times in the cycle of your firm where, if you're just starting out, it's going to make sense for you to learn about marketing and do it and do it yourself if you don't have a lot of clients. But for these firms that are a little more established, the most painful place, I think, is in the middle place, right? Where so you have a lot of clients, but they're very dependent on you as the firm owner. And so you feel stretched from a time perspective, but maybe you're not making quite so much money yet that you feel good about spending, like hiring out, some of these services. So that's probably when they come to you, I would imagine.
Well, sometimes they come to me to acquire because of that, because that's the benefit of making an acquisition is you just leapfrog all those painful growth things that you have instant growth, and so that can accelerate your evolution as an owner.
Yeah. Well, this is a fascinating conversation, Brannon. You obviously know a lot about this space. Where, if people are thinking, well, I'm going to ask you two questions. You mentioned one example of when someone is ready to leapfrog that feeling of busyness. How would people know if they should get in touch with Brannon Poe Group, and who's a right fit for what you guys can help people with? And then the second question is just, how do they find you?
So the second question is PoeGroupAdvisors.com. That's the easy one. The first question is, we help firms typically, I guess most of our client base is probably between 1 and 5 million in revenue. Mm-hmm. We do have some smaller than that. We have some larger than that. And our Accounting Practice Academy is great for an owner or a partner that just, wants to make more money and work less. And that's really as simple as that. But, whoever, if you own a firm and you're thinking about exiting, we can help with that planning. We can have some planning conversations years before someone's ready to exit. And buyers too, we're very focused on fit. So we want to pair buyers and sellers that are going to be a good fit. And, we pride ourselves on taking that extra time and keeping focused on the things that are going to actually make a successful transition.
Yeah. Well, for all the listeners, PoeGroupAdvisors.com, so you can find more about Brannon and his team. You also have a podcast, right?
Yes, the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast, which you were a recent guest on.
Yeah, I was on the show. Brandon's on this show. So check that out as well. We all know that listeners of podcasts listen to other podcasts, so it's a good opportunity to talk about the various shows. So, well, Brannon, thanks again for being on the Marketing for Accounting Firms podcast today. This is a great conversation. We'll definitely keep in touch, and I love the work that you're doing with firm owners. Continue to do that and help them get back their time, become more successful, all of that. It's great.
Likewise. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Marketing for Accounting Firms podcast. If you liked this conversation and found it valuable, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's really good for the algorithm and it helps other firm owners find this show. You can subscribe to our weekly Marketing for Accounting Firms newsletter at marketingforaccountingfirms.com. And you can connect with me, Matt Banker, on LinkedIn or Twitter. We hope you tune in next time for another episode of Marketing for Accounting Firms.